More on Pompeo's trip, let's bring in Aurel Braun. He is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. Professor Braun, thanks for joining us. Pompeo is trying to reassure the Japanese that Washington will protect their interests. Spell out those interests for us if you could, and should Tokyo trust him?
Japan certainly is taking a tough line. They have citizens who have been abducted by North Korea. They want those citizens back. They want to make sure that North Korea denuclearizes because they are geographically in close proximity. They want to make certain that North Korea does not resume testing of missiles, some of which have been fired over Japan. And the United States has proclaimed that these are shared goals. So I think the general approach that Japan is suggesting is not very different from that in the United States. But in the case of the United States, we have a difference of rhetoric between the president and Mr. Pompeo. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, tends to combine hype and hope. He even employed a kind of odd poetic license when he described his reaction to what were supposed to be beautiful letters from Kim Jong-un, and the president said, well, we kind of fell in love. Well, Mike Pompeo is the hard, cold realist, whereas the President of the United States tends to raise expectations. Mr. Pompeo is working hard to lower them.
The DPRK wants Washington to focus on confidence-building measures and not sanctions. So how will that play out on Sunday when Pompeo meets with Chairman Kim?
It will be very difficult because I think not only is there an overall strategic goal the United States has, we must differentiate between the rhetoric that is employed by the President of the United States and the reality of his policies, which are pretty tough policies. The United States has the strategic goal of denuclearization, and until there is concrete move towards that, it is not prepared to lift sanctions. It is not prepared, at least for the time being, to sign on to an end of war declaration. But the United States has the problem of alliance management. So you saw the first stop in Japan, and that went well. But there is an issue with South Korea. The South Korean president at the moment is much more dovish than his predecessor. And Mr. Moon wants to have what in the Cold War used to be called constructive engagement, or in the case of West Germany, in the Cold War it was Ostpolitik, confidence-building measures. Those did not work all that well during the Cold War, and it was very difficult for the United States and for NATO to manage West Germany because in some ways, whether it was West Germany or South Korea, they are much more dependent on peace. They are much less free to take chances, and so this will be the test of successful alliance management, whether the United States can sort of cool the expectations that Mr. Moon is having, while at the same time maintain good relations with the South Koreans, because ultimately any peace agreement has to be condoned and supported not only by the United States and by North Korea, but also by South Korea and
Professor
Japan.
Braun, I quickly have to ask you, because he'll go to South Korea as well, but also to Beijing. So briefly tell me, why is that part of this trip?
Well, it's very clear that China plays a huge role, whether it comes to sanctions, whether it comes to influencing North Korea. So I think it is wise of Mr. Pompeo. It shows his realism and that of the American administration that it is important to consult with China.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you to Professor Aurel Braun from the University of Toronto.